He's also a prolific writer. He's written several books on Chinese medicine. His latest, that goes really well with this course, is Acupuncture for the treatment for treating the hidden roots of diseases. Excellent textbook. I highly recommend you pick up a copy of that for yourself. For those watching this as a live webinar, please say hello in the chat room. Just want to bring up my disclaimer slide here. Please know that this is for educational purposes only. This is not intended to be medical advice. Therefore, this should not be interpreted as medical advice. If you have a health condition, please seek out a healthcare provider. Again, this is for educational purposes only. Let's please bring up Hamid's PowerPoint presentation. During the live webinar, please ask questions. Our team will moderate those questions and present those to Hamid during the Q&A period. For those both doing live or on demand, please remember you have those 5 short answer questions that you can start looking at now and start to answer those questions as you listen. For those doing the on-demand recording, you only do the quiz once you've watched the whole course, done those 5 short answers, then you do the quiz and the evaluation. For those doing the live, same thing. Watch the course in its entirety, fill out those 5 short answer questions. You don't have the quiz if you're doing the live webinar. You go right to the course evaluation after the 5 short answer questions. Guys, do we have Dr. Hamid Montakab's PowerPoint ready?
Yeah, I'm sure he's just getting it ready.
Perfect.
Okay, shall I go?
You are good to go.
All right, there we go. So welcome to everyone. I see a lot of you, it's the first time you're joining these lectures. Basically, I will present my apologies to those who have already attended the previous ones, because I will have to repeat a few topics at the beginning so we know that we are in the right context. And for those who are joining, I apologize because the reminders are going to be very quick. And so in case you need a deeper understanding, you can always sort of catch up on the previous lectures. So the topic that we are covering today, I find it a huge topic in not only in Chinese medicine, but basically in our lives. And I also think it's a very ambitious topic because we are going to be exploring how our belief mechanisms are formatted, and also trying to find ways if we can change actually our the way that we perceive the world, and obviously how we can change our daily reality. Now, the perception of the world, this we have talked about several times. Basically, how we perceive the world and our personal beliefs is defined by the way that these beliefs have been formatted and structured. These beliefs are basically depend on many factors that we have been looking at in the previous lectures. Obviously, a factor which is related to pre-heaven energetics, that means constitutional energetics, and this is defined by the Jing, the hereditary factors, which today we can relate to the genetics. And these elements are non-reversible. Obviously, they are sort of transmitted via the code, the DNA code and the genes. But interestingly, it's been discovered that the genes are not obligatory. Their expression is not obligatory. Only about 20 to 25% of those genes are expressed, and about, as you can see, almost 3/4 are potential. It means they may or may not be activated. This activation seems to be related to particular structures on the DNA, the histones, which are later have been classified in the name of epigenetics. Now, epigenetics are these other fractions of the DNA which will make the genes activated or not. We have explored also the constitution, and the basic constitution, which is going to be giving us the sort of the fundamental formatting, which is later will become our sort of the structure of our mind, of our psyche, and the basis of our belief mechanisms. But this constitution that we explored in the third webinar is itself going to be modulated by what we will refer to as the temperament. The temperament is the way that we behave habitually. It's our habitual sort of psycho-emotional attitude in life. And this temperament is defined by the 5th lunar month of pregnancy. And it seems that partially the temperament is rooted in the constitution, in the Jing, partially in the Zongchi. And this Zongchi that the Chinese have defined is one of the 3 energetics which define the moment of conception. And the Zongchi is transmitted via the parents. The name Zongchi refers to ancestral energy, and it differs from genetics because it has to do with recent ancestry. They estimate between 3 and 5 ancestors. In this Zongchi, we have a lot of information which has to do also with psycho-emotional events that maybe our ancestors have experienced, and this is passed down, including also events that have to do with environmental changes, and therefore sometimes people also refer to the Zongchi as the sort of the position of the planets at the moment of conception, which in the West we usually refer to as astrology. Now, these are the constituent elements that we are born with. But from the very moment of our birth, we are going to be subjected to different experiences. A lot of these experiences at the early ages will be experienced as traumatic. And these traumas are going to be registered in the subconscious, and they are going to constitute a very important part of our belief mechanisms that we are going to be exploring, obviously, in this workshop and also in the future workshop where we are going to explore what we call the body memories. In the afterbirth, another very important element that will be sort of formatting our beliefs is culture and conditioning. This is extremely important. I will expand on it later in this discussion, but just to underline that this point of conditioning, I believe personally that the humans today have never been as conditioned as we are today. And this we will take over and talk about. Then there is the conscious memory, that is memory of events that we remember, that we can recall. And obviously there is included our achievements, our life experiences, and we will be exploring the sections of the psyche which is responsible for that, and mostly the subconscious memories. And we know that the subconscious aspect of the psyche constitutes actually 9/10 of the functions of the psyche, and most of the psycho-emotional aspects are going to be retained by Hun, which is the what we call the ethereal soul or ethereal body, and this we'll explore in this webinar. And part of the subconscious memories are retained in the body directly, which we call body memories, and these are classified as body armors, and we will be exploring this in the next webinar, where we are going to see actually the impact of these body memories and how to release them. Now, basically, we have already spoken about this in previous webinars. How does actually our brain function? How do we perceive the outer world? Now, the Chinese have given us a model. They speak about Shen, obviously, being the not, translated, one translation is given is spirit, but also it's consciousness, it's also the acuity, intelligence, etc. Shen has many, many dimensions that we have already explored in the first webinar. Now, we know that for the mind to function, two aspects of Shen are necessary. One is the Shen Guan, which is basically the faculty of being conscious, as opposed to being in a coma or asleep or disconnected from the body. And the other one is Shen Ming, the clarity of Shen, which allows for the sort of optimum function of the sensory organs. Now, all of the sensory organs are dependent on this, and their function is dependent on this aspect of Shen, which is very important. Otherwise, for example, the vision is blurred or the hearing is disturbed, etc. So we need the two aspects of Shen for a reception of outer perceptions, which is optimal. But then how we perceive, how we see things has to be interpreted. Part of this interpretation is done by the function of Yi, the intellect, which bases the new sensory input on the previous registered information by comparison. This is the memory system. This is how a child is learning and then learns to identify the objects with the previously classified information. But then this notion is a conscious function, but we know that 9/10 of the mental functions are either considered sub or unconscious functions. The unconscious part of the mind or the psyche is actually much stronger. It's like represents 9/10 of the function of the psyche. And in this unconscious part of these are the conditionings that we have received. Part of it is the constitutional aspects that I mentioned previously, the temperament, etc. So we see that there will be a notion here of what we call filtering. That means that we don't see the world as it is. We see the world as we are. And that is a very important point to make. That means we don't have a universal notion of reality. And psychologists have estimated that between two people which are experiencing the same reality at the same time, about only 50% of that is commonly shared. The other 50% is an interpretation, an individual interpretation that we make. So constitution, which is part of what we call nature, we are born in this way. Temperament, again, we have seen is a sort of defined during the fifth lunar month. And this temperament itself is partly rooted in the constitution, but partly rooted in what the Chinese believe to be the Ming. The Ming is what is known as the life curriculum. It's a program that we are sort of born with. Actually, it's a program that is brought by the Shen at the moment of conception. This is a concept which is very interesting. For the Chinese conception, the physical part of the conception is defined by the three energetics of the Jing, of the parents, the Yuan Qi of the universe is the basic principle of life, and thirdly, the Zongchi, the ancestral Qi, which is a combination of the environment, the alignment of the planets, and also the ancestry of the person. But at that moment, once the physical aspect has been completed, the Shen appears. That's how they describe it. And the Shen actually is what we will be referring to as our individual sort of consciousness, our individual spirit. It incarnates the physical body at that moment, bringing with it a program, what we call as a curriculum. And this is what will be the sort of the program of my life. It's going to be what is going to define how I go through life, the experiences I have to learn through this life, etc. And this is called the Ming. And once the Shen, which is the spirit, incarnates the body, which is the original cell, it becomes the soul. And the soul is going to be how, and Chinese have a term for it, they call it the Ling. And the soul is going to be the one experiencing all of these experiences in life. According to the Taoist, after death, the Shen goes back to heaven to join the universal Shen. So we are part of a much bigger consciousness, the universal Shen, and that at the moment we incarnate into the body, we become separated, or at least we have the illusion of this separateness during our life time in the body. After that, we go back and join this universal Shen. Obviously, these are the Taoist beliefs, but we can replace some of this terminology. For example, the universal Shen can be easily replaced by the concept of a creative energy, the creator, God, or terms that are more easy for us to accept. During our the conception period, the 10 lunar months of pregnancy, we are subjected to the Zongchi of the mother. That means that we are sharing with the mother all that she is experiencing, including obviously the climate, including the foods, but especially the emotional condition of the mother. And after birth, this goes on by the conditioning that we receive as children at home first, and then in the society, at school, and of course the social conditioning. And this one, we can refer to it as nurture. Now, the nature, it could also be defined as what we have genetically inherited, and nurture is going to be how these genes are going to be activated or not. And this is what I find it a fabulous discovery of epigenetics is bringing, to say that actually it's, we will see in this webinar, our thoughts and our emotions are going to impact on what we have received genetically, and this impact will make those genes active or not. That means that a particular disease, for example, might or might not manifest depending on our belief mechanisms and our mindsets. This is very important to keep in mind.